god, like the old me kind of bubbled up a little bit and I was like, can the ground swallow me whole, please? I used to absolutely dread presenting and now I kind of love it. So in this video I'll share how I got here and how you'll get here as well. So first let me introduce myself. I am maiphora. I have a bachelor's degree in international business administration. I've studied abroad at Korea University Business School. I have done an internship at Accenture, worked in corporate a little bit, and now I also have my master's degree in digital business and innovation, specialized in generative AI and entrepreneurship. And I'm currently working as an AI startup founder for my startup Xflora. So yeah, I've been in a lot of different environments, done a lot of different pitches, presentations, and it was always kind of interesting that like people complimented me on my presentation skills, because in the past I used to be so shy and so awkward and I hated presenting. Like it was just such a difficult thing for me, and yeah, I've learned and trained myself to be better at it, and it's all kind of like mindset a little bit as well. We'll get into all the details, but yeah, I definitely think people can train themselves to be better at presenting. Like even when I think of like my first day at Accenture, we had this kind of like general meeting with all different teams, so it's like a lot of people, and they were like, yeah, do we have any new employees? They want to introduce themselves, and I was like, oh my god, like the old me kind of bubbled up a little bit and I was like, can the ground swallow me whole, please? Like yeah, it was just interesting. And then I kind of like switched my mindset. I was like, yeah, you remember who you are, and yeah, it's just kind of interesting to see. So anyways, we'll get into all the like tips and tricks, because you'll definitely become a proud presenter after this video. So yeah, let's get into it. Alright, so every presentation starts with you. So what I mean with that is that your body language is really important, and I know that might sound scary, but like most of the times people are really looking at you and like the way you are kind of like presenting and base their opinion on your presentation like on that. So for instance, if you're like fiddling around, you're nervous, people might like not feel that your presentation is as strong, even though the facts might be correct, like the presentation in terms of information is really good. They might feel like it's just not that good just based on how your body language is, because if you're like stuttering, like fiddling around, they will feel nervous for you, right? And sometimes even when you have like a person that's very calm, confident, but the stuff they're saying is literal BS, the audience might still kind of receive their presentation in a different, like in a better way, just based on how they're doing it. Okay, so how do you actually be confident and how are you going to be calm, right, during a presentation? So there are some tips and tricks on how to do that, so you can like fake it until you actually become it. So the first thing that I would recommend is your hands, right? So I personally really like talking with my hands, etc., and it might be difficult for you to do that, so you could always just hold your finger if you want, or like hold something so you don't fiddle around. Like if I keep doing this, it's kind of annoying, right, as I'm speaking. Also moving around, of course, if you want to kind of assert your presence and slowly move around in the room as you're speaking, a lot of like speakers, presenters do that, then that's fine, but don't like fiddle around in your like move a lot, right? Because that's also kind of distracting and you don't want to distract your audience too much from what you're saying. One thing I also really recommend is look the audience in their eyes, like, or how do you say that, like really try to kind of look at each person as you're presenting. And I know that might sound scary as well, like kind of looking at everyone, you don't want to like maybe look at them, but that's something that really can assert your kind of like presence and your confidence as well. Like instead of looking at the ground or just looking at one spot, because sometimes people give that as a tip, like look at one spot. I definitely think it's like better if you kind of look at a person in their eyes for like a second, like you don't have to deeply look at someone, but just like for a second and like look around. That will show that you're very confident in what you're saying. Which brings me to my next point, which is say it with your chest. Like one thing that I've personally had is that sometimes I'm like very well prepared, I did my research, I know what I'm saying, but then I look at people in the audience and they might have like a facial expression, and then I get like nervous. I'm like, oh wait, am I saying the correct thing? Like I'm kind of second guessing myself as I'm speaking, and that's something I recommend do not do. Just be confident. Don't even like, even if someone has a specific facial expression where you're kind of trying to read into it as you're presenting, maybe you don't even do this, but that's personally what I did. Just forget that. Just say everything with your chest, believe everything you're saying, and that's something that's really important, because that brings like that shows to people like, you know, she knows what she's doing, because you know, a person might not even think about, like, sometimes audience members, I'm not gonna lie, they might just be thinking like, what am I gonna have for dinner and stuff like that, you know what I mean? So yeah, just try to make sure that you say everything with your chest. And then also make sure that you breathe. So personally, I'm a very fast talker as I'm presenting or pitching. That's mainly like the feedback I've gotten, is that I always kind of speak fast. So one thing that always is like important to do is try to integrate silences as you're speaking, because that shows that you're calm as well. So you know, sometimes if you're speaking, you might say like as you're transitioning into a different topic. So try to replace those kind of like or like or whatever. Like some people have the like tendencies, that's something I have as well. But anyways, try to replace those with just a silence, like just a 5-second silence. It might feel like eternity for you, but for the audience, it's not that long. Like if you just like take a 5-second like break to breathe, they will actually feel like, okay, it's kind of like good for like the story, and yeah, they feel like calm as well. And then one thing that's also super important is to grab people's attention. So with presentations, you might have like, they might be sitting through multiple presentations and it could just be boring for them, specific type of information. It depends of course on which pitch it is, which presentation, but maybe for a specific course you're doing this presentation, and the way to do that is grab someone's attention from the beginning. So that's something that a lot of books talk about, and you know, people, speakers, etc. But try to start your presentation with just a simple question. That's something that's always great. But I will say, like from my experience, sometimes people complicate those questions a bit too much. So just try to make it like an easy question, like how many of you have just something that is easily, can it be easily answered by the audience and that engages them a little bit. Or you could start off with like a fact, like what if I told you that, and you can use like a number that's like very excessive, and it's like something that's like, whoa, like people are shocked by it, right? Or you could just do a little anecdote, like a personal anecdote, just something simple so people can kind of get invested in the story you're going to tell, even though it might be just like the type of information you're going to relay is very specific and might not be super interesting, but you, I don't know, have to do it for a course. Like just try to make it a bit more fun, like with metaphors, anecdotes. That's something I always try, even with Explora when I did my pitches. I always try to just integrate a little bit of an anecdote, or you could do a joke, something to kind of catch someone's attention. I think that's super important for sure, to keep someone's engaged with your presentation. Okay, so now that we went through kind of the body language and certain tips that can help you kind of throughout a presentation, it's also important to understand how to prepare for a presentation, because preparation is everything, to be honest. So the way I approach presentations in terms of preparation is I always like to prepare out loud. So I think that's super important, because even for exams, if you don't practice, if you don't do exercises, you might just revise and be like, okay, I got this information, and then on the exam you might fail or anything because you hadn't practiced like specific questions. So that's always why you want to prepare those things. The same goes for presentations. If you're just like trying to memorize your text but you haven't practiced it out loud at all, you haven't tried to stand up and kind of envisioned yourself in front of an audience, it's going to be difficult when you're actually in that environment. So what I personally always do is that also one thing that's also super important is that try to make sure that the information you're relaying is in the language you're speaking. So okay, so what I do is then I know I have to talk about certain topics. I try to speak as I'm already like presenting, because it's important to understand what you're saying, right? And have it in your language. So I, for instance, like speak, and now with ChatGPT it's kind of nice that you can actually kind of record yourself and it can relay it in terms of like, it can transcribe it for you. But in the past I used to just manually write it down as I'm speaking, what I wanted to say, so it's in my language. And then what I would do is actually practice it out loud in front of a mirror, like stand around, try to put myself in a position where I'm already like, my body's getting used to it, right? Because if you're doing it for the first time, your body's gonna be like, whoa, I'm in front of so many people, I'm standing up, I'm speaking. Just try to practice, right? So that's something that I definitely think is really important for your preparation. Practice out loud. Try to already envision yourself in front of the audience. Make sure that the text that or information that you're relaying is you understand that information and make sure that it's also being relayed in a language that you're speaking. Like some people might integrate like difficult words, etc. That's fine, but just make sure that you say that with confidence, right? It's not like you're just memorizing a text. And it's okay if that's your process. If you like memorizing a text, that's fine as well. I like to do that as well, but like I try to write it out in a way that I would speak. So it's not like some other different, like, you know, out of the ordinary text that I'm memorizing. Lastly, we have the visual aspect of a presentation. So interestingly enough, I've seen a lot of university students, for instance, have presentations where they have a lot of text on it. And I definitely think that's like a wrong approach. As an audience member, you don't want to read a lot of stuff. You just want to listen to a story, right? And it's important that you make sure that your slides kind of can support that story and not have the story on it. It's not a book, right? It's a presentation. So make sure that you just have some keywords. Make sure that your presentation is minimalistic in terms of like, of course you can have a sentence here and there. What I personally always like to do is if I have a sentence that's like relevant, I try to make sure that I have some words bolded or in different colors. Canva has a lot of templates that you can play around with. Yeah, and just make sure that it's in your style. You have, you know, make sure that it is what you want in terms of taste. You can use, like, if you want to use images, try to make them, put them in a circle or do something that can kind of like make the presentation a bit pretty and make it like that it's just a supporting visual, not that it's like the story, right? Because that will just distract, again, the audience member, and you want to be confident. You want to be able to pitch and present without even thinking about slides. Personally, what I always do is I already have my story, I already know what I'm going to say, and then afterwards I make the slides just some bullet points that can kind of support my story and also make it clear for the audience as well what I'm talking about, right? Also, as we're speaking about the visuals, try to make sure that you look good, because if you look good, you feel good. Just make sure that you have like a nice outfit on, etc. These are kind of like basic things. I personally always wanted to wear blue for some reason, because like, well, I know the reason. I always thought that blue kind of represented calmness, and that's always what I wanted to represent during presentations. And I always got like high grades on presentations and stuff, and I always wanted just to wear blue because I felt like that worked. I don't do that now, but it's still something that is just a random thing. Yeah, try to make sure that you look good and feel good, and yeah, I think that's relevant as well. Lastly, put some skin in the game. What I mean with that is make sure that you put yourself out there. Practice a lot. Make sure that you do a lot of presentations. During my master's degree, for instance, any opportunity that I had to present, to pitch, I took it because I knew I would get better. During COVID, for instance, obviously you would do presentations on your like laptop via Zoom, etc., but it wasn't in real life, and in real life it's a bit different. So when I was doing my internship at Accenture, I had to do that a lot, presenting, etc., and I felt like I was getting back to my normal self, right? And as I did my master's, I really felt like I improved a lot because I put myself in those positions. So try to just do presentations. Like, I know if you like, you might be nervous, you might be like, oh no, someone else from my team could do it in case it's like a group project in uni or anything, but just try to be that person that people can rely on, because if you believe that you are, you will become it, right? So that's kind of what I did. So put some skin in the game. Just like any sports, you have to put something in it, right? You have to put some effort, exercise time, whatever it is, and you'll get better. So that's something I definitely think is super important to take away. So yeah, these are all my tips. I definitely believe if you implement some of these and just are a bit more mindful of things during a presentation, you're definitely going to get better. Let me know in the comments if you have any like golden tips that can help people out as they want to do presentations, pitching, and yeah, save this for your next presentation. Thank you for watching and see you next Thursday. Bye!